Perfect. So today is International Women's Day. It is a day to celebrate women and girls across the globe. Certainly is an indicator of how far we have come, equally an indicator of how far we still have to go to really achieve a diverse, inclusive, and most importantly, equitable world for women and girls. And having said that, allyship plays a critical role in progress, right? However, performative allyship certainly hinders it. So the question is, can you distinguish between genuine allyship and performative allyship? Do you know what to look for? Are you essentially focusing on performative or genuine allyship? What are the differences between the two? And what does the organization that you work for or are running fall under? So I'm really excited to host Surabhi Jain, who's the founder of Women in Power. And Women in Power really aims to create brave and safe spaces for white and racialized women to really share their lived experiences at the intersection of race and gender and patriarchy to really become intentional allies. So I guess Surabhi, let's chat about this here to kind of kickstart this conversation. What is essentially your call for action today, or the one thing that you're really calling for today, as it is International Women's Day, as it relates to performative allyship?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Samya. I'm really excited to talk about this. I think the one thing that I'm calling for is for organizations, individuals, corporations to recognize that International Women's Day is one day, but the work that women do is 365 days a year. So
Right.
one day is great to recognize them, but that allyship needs to continue beyond the one day, right? You don't want to be a performative ally the rest 364 days of the year. So my one call to action is recognize that women are a contributor, recognize that allyship has to continue, and we have to walk the talk. You have to go beyond just talking.
Right. No, I think that's such a great point. And I guess for my and from my perspective in terms of call for action, really take a deep dive into the type of ally you are as a person. And even looking at it from a perspective, what kind of allyship is your organization kind of putting out there into the community? What does that mean? Like, what is the ownership of that piece of allyship? What is it that you're exuding into the community, and how are you doing internally as far as being an ally as well? So that's actually a really great point. Is actions speak louder than words? It's the
That's
simplest
right.
term, but it has such a huge weight to it as well. So let's actually dig a little bit deeper and talk about our personal journeys in performative allyship. And there's been so many experiences that I have certainly been through as an immigrant woman, as a woman of color, who've been in spaces where I am maybe one of a handful of people in organizations, really talking about genuine, intentional, equitable allyship. Um, so you could probably relate to this here. I've been in circumstances where I'm going into an organization. I've spoken to leaders in the executive level, and the conversation always starts off as, you know what, like, let us know how we're doing. Let
Yeah.
us know how we're doing in this kind of inclusive space that we're putting out there into the community. I want to know. You know, there's no wrong thing that you can say to me. I'm open. I'm open to criticism. So I'm like, okay, this is great, right? And then there's times or circumstances where I've been like, okay, I will take your word for it, and I will tell you this isn't right. This, if anything, this is a form of microaggression. These are ways to segregate more people. It hinders the progress. We need to essentially do like an internal audit and how we're doing in the allyship space and what we're preaching out to the community. But
Right.
oftentimes when I say this, it's taken as a like a oh, how dare you, right? How
Of
dare you,
course. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And folks who are in the space, who are new in the space, may not intend or understand that, okay, you know what, that is a possibility, that pushback, even though we're told, come to me with anything,
Yeah.
that possibility of pushback. And then you are like, okay, well, what is the purpose of you telling me to tell you what's happening, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you've experienced as it relates to performative allyship?
Yeah, I think I have to emphasize on this. While I've experienced performative allyship, I've also been a performative ally
Mm,
before I knew better. So I'll give you examples of both just to
yeah,
say, show what sort of my journey has been.
yeah.
So um, when I've experienced, oftentimes it's shown up as, we trust you, we want you to go lead XYZ project.
Mm,
Uh, and then when I'm, and we have it, we're supporting you, we're your safety net. And then when I go lead it and something goes wrong, um, nobody wants to be your ally. Nobody wants to be your support. It's all you,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that happens very commonly with women, I would say, just because I feel like at the top you're making these decisions and then you're left alone.
Mhm.
I've also seen it show up when I've been approached to do some consulting work. And I've been asked, like, oh, we're really interested in bringing you on. You have the experience, and you're part of the diverse group, and you're a woman, and you're South Asian, and then when I start doing the work, I realize I'm not being paid as much as what a white man is being paid for
Mm,
similar work, uh, and and I see those sort of differences show up all the time, where organizations are trying to be allies and they're trying to say, we want to bring in this diverse group, we want to support women, but then you can't not pay them what you're paying white men, right? That's how performative allyship shows up, where you may be talking about allyship, but it doesn't, you're not doing you're not walking that talk, or as you said, your actions speak louder than words.
yeah.
um, and then I think I was really surprised last year when I saw many individuals change their social media profiles to orange shirts or orange boxes on September 30th, when there was the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And it got me thinking, should I be doing it? Like, should I be putting an orange box? Because that's what seems like the social media confirmation looks like.
Mhm.
And it forced me to step back and think, is it really about just this orange box, or am I actually doing something about those 94 call to actions? How am I being an ally to the
Yeah,
indigenous people? And if I'm not being an ally, this orange box is certainly performative allyship.
yeah.
So I bring that up because it's easy to go with the flow, and it's easy to just put that orange box and show your support. But
Right.
it takes a lot more intentionality to be like, is this truly about allyship? Is this about conforming to a social media trend?
Hmm.
Or is this about performative allyship, quite
Right.
honestly?
Right. No, I think that's an excellent point. Even let's take International Women's Day, right? The amount of organizations that spend funding and time and effort, putting conferences together, putting events together, having speaker
Yeah.
series, ensuring that it's an inclusive series. Sometimes, but sometimes, getting the marketing and like all these things, all this effort for one day,
I know.
right? All of this effort for one day. But what happens afterwards? And also, what happens within the organization itself? Is it more like a, hey, you know what, folks, everyone else is doing it, we got to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but there's no like accountability, right? There's this intentional allyship really focuses on ensuring that there is essential fostering that's there to ensure that there's progress and inclusivity. However, there's that showcasing,
Yep.
right, of allyship, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, which majority of the times is across people, it's across communities. It's taken as tokenism.
Yeah.
It's very disingenuous, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
It's looking at, okay, well, great. Well, organization's doing it. We've done it. Let's look at. So tomorrow is just like normal day. it's
Yeah.
not about auditing our organization. It's not about looking at, okay, well, how are we holding ourselves accountable? What are our consequences? Right? What is our
Absolutely. Yeah.
commitment? And
Yeah.
even digging a bit deeper, allyship has become one of those terms that people just throw around, right?
Yeah.
Organizations just throw it around. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
we're allies with these communities. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean, right? Um, so I guess the question is, can folks really pinpoint performative allyship? Because it's so it's looked at as so like normalized in the way that it's done right now, right? So what are kind of the red flags, would you say, when it comes to performative allyship, whether that's within a person, the way they're doing it, or in the
Yeah.
organization, so they know what to kind of look for?
Yeah. Uh, I think it might be helpful to start with defining what allyship is, right? So it goes beyond just, um, I know you, I want to support you, how can I do this? It is really recognizing the power and privilege you hold to support somebody from a marginalized group.
Mm,
And it talks about being action oriented. It's not just saying, I recognize you and I want to help you. It's about, I recognize you, I want to help you. And this is what I'm going to do
right.
to make sure you don't have to go through this again, or the injustice that's happening. This is how I'm going to stand up for you. So it requires you to learn, unlearn, and relearn all the things that are about performative allyship. It requires you to go beyond just that lip service. And performative allyship, on the other hand, is all of those things without action. It's just saying, yes, I see you, I hear you, but not doing anything about it. So I would say red flags are when you go back to work on March 9th and those special things that were there for you are no longer there. They were just one day, right? A special breakfast, a special meal, all of these conferences, all of these opportunities. It's just there for that one day. Now, I'm not expecting companies to have breakfast every day, but also if you're going to make it special for one day, then you have to do a little bit more than that the rest of the 364 days, right? I also think there's a lot of patronizing of women that happens, right? So that probably needs to stop, but there needs to be genuine respect and genuine support and genuine championing of women, and really helping them advance, whether that's in leadership, whether that's in their personal life, whether it's in other circumstances. Really, just how do I go and do that? The other thing I've heard so often talk about is, our organization makes sure there's space for every woman at the table. Uh, and my question is, instead of making sure there is room for every woman at the table, why are we not creating another table so that more women can be at that table? We keep saying bring chairs to the table, make the table bigger, but we don't talk about actually creating another table. So why can't we just have a table? So why can't companies do that? And I bring these up as things and actions that companies can do, but also to talk about things that are not happening, right? So when you say, how do you spot that performative allyship? These are exactly the red flags of things that are not happening. There is no support for them, there is no championing, there is uh, nobody's walking the talk. You'll have a supervisor perhaps saying they're supporting you, but then you don't see that translate into action. You don't see that translated into a promotion. You don't see that translated into an equitable salary. You don't see that translated into opportunities that are being given to you. So those are sort of red flags from a workplace perspective, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I guess even looking at it from even my personal experiences, if I looked at is that someone was always waiting for the other person to do something about it, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, well, I know it's there. I don't want to touch it. I
Yeah,
don't see it.
of
I don't want to
course.
touch it, right? But I think the responsibility, I guess, in a sense, should equally fall under people, right? And saying, okay, well, you know what? The company's not going to do anything about it. I'm going to
Of
take it upon
course.
myself and I'm going to create something. But I think there's at the same time there's a level of accountability that we as individuals don't take on, right? Because we're always relying on the company to say, hey, yeah, you know what? These folks don't have an EDIB table. These
Correct.
folks, right? Exactly. These folks, don't have policies in place to create a more inclusive space. Um, but it's easier to complain. It's
Of course
easier,
it is.
right? And then to say, you
Yeah.
know, what are we all going to do about it together? Like, what is my commitment to this as a person,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I like to think allyship can only happen if you've done some inner work, right?
yeah,
Which requires you to have done some deep introspection about how you're showing up, how you're behaving, and how you need to behave and show up differently. So
yeah.
I always like to talk about these, in my mind, I have these concentric circles. And if you look at the core of it, it is inner work. It is
Mhm,
your own leadership, my personal leadership.
mhm.
How am I changing that?
Right.
Before you have that next concentric circle of inclusive leadership,
Yeah.
which is interpersonal leadership. How is that changing
Hmm.
as a result of the inner work I've done?
Yeah.
And only then can you have that third concentric circle of allyship,
Yeah.
or what in my mind would be your social leadership.
Yeah.
And you can't get to that third circle till you haven't done the inclusive leadership and personal leadership circles. You know, you need to just make sure that you've done your own work before you try and build these social connections and interpersonal connections.
Yeah. No, that
Just
is,
like you said.
yeah, no, that's a wonderful point to bring out, because I think that really also looks into the executive leadership as well, right? So when policies
Absolutely.
are being created, there are EDIB tables and all these things, or even the work that they're doing out into the community or for the organizations and the projects they got funded for, really sitting and dissecting every single thing that they're doing, and evaluating that, how are we doing in this space, like how are we ensuring that people feel safe when they're coming to work, how are we ensuring that um, what we're doing in the community is actually what we need to be doing, like what is
Right.
the feedback that we're getting, where is the feedback that we're getting internally, right? And how are we going to intentionally open ourselves up to criticism and have it be
Oh yeah,
okay,
that's the point.
right? How have it be okay, and also allow for people to criticize and call you out on it and saying like this isn't good, like you know, um, instead of having it just be at the executive level, having it be a welcoming space for everyone to actually comment on things that are being implemented internally and things that are being done externally into the community.
Yeah, and I think it's not as much about criticism as much as perhaps showing the mirror, or really
Yeah,
bringing to light things can be done differently.
yeah.
And oftentimes they get taken up as criticism,
Hmm.
right? So if I was to bring a divergent idea, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that I am against what you're saying. I'm just saying there's a better way of doing this.
Hmm.
And perhaps we should look at another modality, another strategy, another option, whatever that might be,
Yeah.
instead of criticism.
Yeah. No, that is a great point, and that what kind of leads that to that accountability piece that we've been talking about this
Yeah.
conversation. So today is International Women's Day, and we spoke about what organizations, companies, people doing the likes and the reposts and writing blog posts on the importance of International Women's Day, doing a speaker series and all these things to really showcase how inclusive they are, to really
Yeah.
showcase what a wonderful ally they are, right? So,
Yeah.
and how equitable they are,
Yeah.
and really kind of committing themselves to these practices. So, what happens to your point? What happens after March 8th, right? How can we ensure that these practices are continual? And how can we measure the impact of what we're
Yeah.
doing, right?
Absolutely.
So, in terms of those accountability pieces, like what are some of the things that you feel like would need to happen to really hold ourselves accountable and organizations accountable?
Yeah, I would say is call out when you see unfair behavior. so you can keep those organizations and those individuals in check so they know it is unjust behavior. I would say pay women what you pay white men, and especially women of color. I would say pay women speakers what you pay your men speakers, uh, and and stop pitting women against women. There's room. If there's room for more men uh, in a room, there's room for more women, certainly. So instead of continuously pitting us against each other, it's important that we create these safe and brave spaces so women can feel comfortable being there and can continue to uplift each other.
No, that's an excellent point. Ensuring that women are building each other up, right? That we're lifting each
Absolutely.
other up, that we're empowering each other, encouraging each other, rather than having an agenda behind it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Having an agenda. And I feel so strongly about mentorship, genuine mentorship,
Yes, yes.
genuine mentorship. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often, right? Sometimes you're overshadowed. It's not the right type of mentor.
Yeah,
Um, and some folks say that they want to mentor you, but in aspect, it's more so for their personal gain, right? Um, and I would really call for, in terms of accountability, I want organizations to actually put things in paper and put it out in the community and saying, hey, you know what, 2023, this is what we're committing to. This is our
right.
accountability. So there's
Yeah,
some form, like someone's holding them to their word, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of like saying, you know what, yes, I'm talking with the organization. That's great. But say it out loud. Say it in the public. Say it in the public eye and say, you know what? We haven't done a great job. And that's okay. This is what we're working towards in 2023. Like, that's what I would love to see happen as far as accountability.
absolutely. And I think it becomes responsible for us as the receptor of that information
Yeah.
to go back and ask questions of those companies, of those individuals.
Yeah.
When we see something that they say is not happening,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We can't be that performative ally
No.
that's sitting on the sidelines when
No.
companies are putting this out by not keeping them in check.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Exactly. So that's great that organizations are doing it, but don't sit on the sidelines.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you going to push this forward? And how are
Exactly.
you going to be an example um,
Correct.
of pushing back, right?
Yes.
Um, so I can go on. This is a wonderful conversation, and I want to essentially end this um, by kind of asking you, what is probably the one thing that you'd want folks to take away after this conversation? What is the one thing that you'd want folks to take away, whether that's a reflective piece or an actionable piece or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think my one takeaway would be just check yourself when you're being a performative ally yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We all do it. It's easy to fall in that trap, whether that's conforming to social media trends, whether that is to make yourself feel happy, whether that is required of your job. There could be many different circumstances. So, how do you check yourself to not be a performative ally? I prefer you don't do something rather than be that person that pretends to do something. So I would say my big takeaway would be just be reflective of your actions and not just do something for the sake of doing, but and then not continue doing it or not have that as your thought process. Because it doesn't help to be a performative ally if you continue to have a bias against something, and it doesn't help you to be an ally if you're doing it just to show it to someone. So if you're going to be an ally, you're doing it because you want to do it and you recognize the power and privilege you hold to make that change happen. So work on making the change happen, not on showing that the change can happen.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I think oftentimes, we live in a world where we're continuously on the go and we don't take time to pause and reflect on what we're doing or not doing, what we should and shouldn't do, and how we're
Right.
doing them. And I think that plays such a critical role in the way that we need to be allies, however that may be, whatever that the need is within the community or for the people that you're supporting, or in the organization that you're working for. And that is such an important piece in the learning and the unlearning, and also
Exactly.
committing ourselves and holding
Yeah,
ourselves accountable to that commitment, right? So
absolutely.
yeah, no, that's such a great piece. So um happy International Women's Day to you.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, to
this
you
has
and your
been,
girls as well.
yes, thank you. Yes, we wore the the shirt for today. Um and I'm really interesting to see how 2023 unravels after this conversation, and hoping that 2024 is all about that accountability piece.
I like that. Here's hoping that we're going to be moving away from performative allyship to accountability.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Surabhi.
Thank you.